Thanks so much for joining. My name's Brian Funk with Session Board. We are back for another weekly live session. And today we're going to be testing a theory, a hypothesis we have, and we're pressure testing it a bit with Neil. We're wondering, are speakers the missing link in your marketing strategy? And why? Speakers embody the core components of Google's SEO EAT framework. Your speakers are your experts. They bring the experience that your audience is looking to learn from. They're authority subject matter experts, and they bring trust into our ecosystems and our communities and into our audiences. So really excited to dive into a conversation today with Neil Patel, co-founder at Neil Patel Digital, and Chris Carver, CEO of Session Board, is going to be moderating today.
Neil, thank you. I've been following you, as you probably know, for a decade now. Back when you and Heaton Shaw, probably even before you guys did you had a little podcast for a while, I think. But for those, do you mind just giving a little bit of background on your story, your background, and what you're doing today, so for the folks that will be joining?
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. Ethan is my brother-in-law. We co-founded a few companies together. We've done some press together, never a podcast together, although that would be a good idea. And I've spoke publicly for many, many years. I don't know how often I speak, but it's a lot. I think some weeks I've done like 4 events because people will send me from like country to country. I remember the last time I was in APAC, actually not the last time, but the time before, I did a few events in Malaysia, then Singapore. I'm missing a country. Oh, and then I also did Hong Kong too. I forgot which one was first or second. I think Hong Kong was first, and then from there. But yeah, I speak quite often. We were talking before this. In 3 hours, I head to the airport to head to Brussels for another speaking engagement and whatever else is on my schedule while I'm in Brussels.
And typically, what are you speaking on?
Marketing. So most people are curious on how to grow their traffic, get more social media followers, likes, but it usually is more corporate focused, like how to get more traffic and sales and how companies should adapt their marketing for the next year.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I've been just always impressed with, and not to just make this the Neil Patel show, but is how much quality content you produce at such a high cadence. It's just, I mean, it is. I've been following it for a long time, but I was wondering, if you could walk me through your process, and what I'm looking for ultimately is to peel that back and say, okay, even with what Brian and I and our marketing team are doing, how can we kind of glean some of that strategy into our own event marketing or our content marketing strategy? So if you could like try to dive in on how you approach it and like give us a little flavor.
The easiest way we think about content is we try to come up with ideas. And then from there, we pick the stuff that we think will resonate with people. But more importantly, we try to talk about stuff that others are not talking about. See, we're in a world, the last stat I checked, I think it was from Search Engine Journal, roughly 4.8 billion pieces of content get published daily or get created daily, not all published. 4.8 billion. In 2 days, you have more content than the whole population of the world. So that content could be audio, could be video, could be text, could be images, right? The list goes on and on. The problem that we face is it's not that we don't have content. We actually have too much content. The only way to do well is to get rid of the regurgitated stuff and create new stuff that no one's talking about. And when we focus on content creation, that's actually the cornerstone. What's new that we can talk about that's going to interest people for our ideal customer? And I think the last part's super important because too many people create content for likes and shares, and they get all this engagement followers, and they're like, yeah, but we didn't generate any revenue. I'm like, well, then who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a sequence? You come up with this new idea. Is there a way you're researching those new ideas? And then is it always you getting on a webinar, creating a video, or do you have a sequence for that?
No, it's not sequences like that. We have quite a bit of a built out team. I don't know how many people on the team, but I know we have a lot of people in the organization. People will submit ideas. We pick ideas that we like. I also pick some of the ideas, or I pick almost all the ideas. But the team will come to me with ideas they like. And then we have people who do the research, brainstorming, surveying, whatever data that needs to be collected. And then we create the content, publish it, and then promote it.
And so when you're publishing it, you're just publishing it on all platforms that you really are comfortable with? How often are you testing that on stage? And, how often are you doing it, testing it like on a webinar then?
We I go on stage often. I don't know the number, but if I had to guess, because some weeks I speak 4 or 5 times, because sometimes when I go to city, I'll speak like at 2 or 3 events in just in that one city. But let's say on average, I speak at least once a week. I would say that's conservative. So if I'm speaking once a week, I'm testing whatever content my team puts in there. I usually actually don't see most of the stuff my team puts in my decks until I'm on stage, believe it or not. And then I'll know the topic, but because I know the content like the back of my hand, I don't really need the slides. And then the slides usually tell a story and I just talk and I can look at the slides and I don't really even need them at all. I just need to know what topic I'm supposed to speak on, but they'll add in the visuals and the charts and all that kind of stuff. As for the social content, I work with the team on that on a daily basis. So every day we're looking at our ideas, the research. Some of them we scrap, some of them, they'll do all this research. We'll have a chart and they'll be like, let's publish it. I'm like, I don't like it. And they'll be like, why? We did all this research. I'm like, the data doesn't tell an interesting story. It tells a story that everyone already knows and they've known for years. So why publish it? Right. And I'm not trying to knock on anyone. I appreciate the hard work that my team does, but unless it's something that we think people are interested in, why publish it?
Yeah.
And that's the key for us. It's what's interesting and new. And if we can have something that's interesting and new, we'll publish it. And we publish that daily. As for filming content, I film usually once every week and a half, once every 2 weeks. And we'll knock out like 10, 13, 14 videos in one film shoot. And they just come with ideas and they come with scripts. I adjust a lot of the scripts. I would probably say 90 to 95% of the time I don't use the scripts. If I like the idea, then I'll just talk. And they'll give me nuggets like data, right? So for example, my team, when I was filming, they came with a script like, dude, we should talk about how Starbucks has a new menu. And I mean, it's a new menu and people are going to hate it. And I was like, what's the new menu? I don't really drink coffee. And they're like, oh, they're reducing the amount of items to make the lines go faster. And I was like, okay. And then they're starting to read the script. I'm like, it's okay. I already got something else. And then I'm like, Google, New York Times, or it was Stanford, it was one or the other. I had them Google a jam study at a supermarket where they reduced the number of jams because I read this years and years ago. And they're like, yeah, supermarket had X amount of jams. Then they cut it down the next day to like 6. I think it was 30 to 6 or 32 to 6. And they were talking about increase in sales. So I had my team Google that on the fly. And then they told me the stat. And I started the intro with the Starbucks CEO is going to piss you off because of this one change or something. And my team came up with the hook actually. And then I just riffed. And I told them, yeah, it's because the lines move faster. And here's what happened. Stanford and Columbia did a study. The first day they went to a grocery store with 32 jams. My number could be off on the number of jams. They had X amount of sales. The next day they reduced the sample amount to 6 jams and the sales actually went up by this. It's like a kid in a candy store. You take a kid in a candy store, too many options. They won't know what they want to buy and yada, yada, yada. You get the point. But that's how I create a lot of my content. And because I've read so many articles over the years and have a decent memory, it helps with future content creation because it allows me to pull stats and data. Now, some of the stats in my head are off because I don't remember everything from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but we all have a cell phone and you can Google on the fly when you're recording and filming and pull up the actual real stat. But I know roughly what the stat was in the results. Sometimes I just forget the exact numbers.
So take a step back. What is your ICP for MP Digital?
My ideal customer profile is someone who is a marketing manager, VP of marketing, CMO, director of marketing, a large company. They don't have to be publicly traded, but ideally over $1 billion in annual revenue.
And do you see yourself as that? Because for your ability to come up with these ideas, you have to be so either that you have to be the ICP or is so empathetic to what that ICP is going through that this type of information is just you're constantly looking for that type of information. It seems like.
We actually don't only create content for our exact customer. And here's why. One, we struggle with enough ideas that we think would be relevant to our ideal customer. But two, a lot of the people who become customers at those companies are marketers that eventually climb the ranks, and they started as a marketing associate, and then they keep getting title promotions, eventually director of marketing. They learn a lot from us. So we focus on creating content for our ideal customer, and we focus on creating content for people who work at large organizations that are in marketing, and they may not have the budget to do things, and they're trying to figure it out, because eventually when they do have the budget, we're top of mind. And that's our strategy. So a lot of our customers come from people following the NP Digital Corporation or my brand for years.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Well, one of the things that a few months ago, and I don't know when you wrote it, but a few months ago, you wrote an article on the Google EAT framework. Can you actually walk through that? Because I read that and immediately I thought about our world, my world of event marketing. And I would love to kind of have you dive into what that is. And then I want to share my hypothesis with you, and then you can stress test that hypothesis.
So EAT, which is EEAT, Google eventually added 2 E's to it instead of 1. Just think of it as experience, expertise, authority, and trust. If your content has some of those elements or all of those elements or one of those elements, the theory is it does better. Now, think of a lot of the content people produce in today's world. It's actually, a lot of it is AI driven, at least when we talk to marketers. So AI is scraping the web, gathering everything else from out there, and then it is spitting out content based on what you ask, but it's using all the past information out there. People want to talk about new stuff, or not even forget what people want to talk about. People want to read and consume new stuff. That means people need to talk about new stuff. So if you can share stuff from your own experience, your expertise, or, things that you have gone through that no one knows about yet, that would be interesting to them. That's interesting. That can do well. And speakers tend to have a lot of that. They just don't know it. But usually if you're a speaker, you may start off speaking and applying for speaking gigs, and most people may deny you because you're new. You keep speaking, you get better at a subject, you keep doing it, you get better at speaking. People start trusting you. You start having more authority in the space, start getting more followers. People want to take pictures with you. You end up building up your experience, building up your expertise. And you can talk about stuff that a lot of people who are new to the field or who aren't specialized in it don't know. So that's the kind of stuff that interests them, not the stuff that they can just do a quick Google search and get the answer for. They want you to talk about stuff they can't do a Google search for and get the answer for. That's the key to creating amazing content. This is what the type of content that a lot of speakers have that they don't really discuss, right? Online, they may discuss it on stage, but they're not necessarily discussing a lot of this online.
Interesting. So when I read it, I immediately thought, well, speakers, they're the subject matter experts. They're the thought leaders. They're the influencers. They're even content generators, right? But we see, it's really hard for event marketing teams to fully leverage that. Or I don't know if it's an education thing where marketing isn't always pulling from those speakers. But if you were running an event marketing organization, how would you kind of leverage that so that it becomes one of the flagship components that marketing can utilize?
So if I was running an event marketing company, you're saying?
The event marketing department of a overall marketing division, I get it.
And you're saying if I was running the event marketing division, the job is to throw an event? Is that correct?
Well, so the job here in my mind is actually to convince the CMO that these are thought leaders, these are subject matter experts. There's a ton of great content that can be leveraged throughout the entire year How do I bubble that up to the marketing organization even more?
Sure. So you can take examples of people like me, or a better example would be Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah, look at all the times he speaks. Look at what it's done for VaynerMedia and the brands and the companies he's created, like Resi or whatever it may be that got acquired. Good for him, right? And show how his team is slicing and dicing that content and using it throughout the year. And look at the engagement they're getting. So you can do one event, have 20, 30 speakers, record it all, and you have shorts, you have long form videos, 30 long talks is 30 weeks worth of content. And then you probably can take out, call it 4 or 5 pieces of short content each and every single week from just one of those speeches. So then now you have content for a majority of the year, and then you can supplement it with other stuff. That would be the pitch. And then I would show them other people who speak often and the results from it.
So when you think about SEO and the Google framework and these speakers, how am I actually taking that speaker content, and then how are you thinking about that from an SEO perspective?
Well, from an SEO perspective, Google ranks videos both long and short. They have tabs for long videos and short videos, so you can get traffic there. Two, the speakers, a lot of them will post that content online, and you're getting branding for your corporation, right? Because you're the one throwing the event. And three, you can turn that content into blog posts. You can turn that content into audio, like podcasts. You can repurpose it and leverage it also for all your social profiles.
And over time, that's where SEO starts to pick up. And then, because one of the hard things that we have in the event industry, and I don't know if you see this, is true attribution, really understanding the ROI from the event.
Yeah.
But it seems like if I can start to invest in these post-content delivery methods, syndication, I can start to actually see attribution post-event as well. Would you agree with that, or any thoughts there?
Yeah. I think you'll pick up business when you just do brand recall studies and find out where they first found you, right? And learned about you. Attribution is tough, and it's actually getting worse because the web is no longer a funnel, right? Long time ago, you would just search on Google, you find a product, you go and buy it whenever you want. Now you may find something on Instagram, then you go do a Google search later on, then you opt into the website's email address, and then you see something on TikTok and remembers that you sign up for that email address, and you get an email, and then you add something to the cart, and then you don't buy, and then you get a remarketing ad, and then you're like, oh, let me buy it now. It's a 10% off. The point I'm getting at is marketing these days is like a complex web, and this web, like a spider web, it's just all intertwined, and it's hard to do direct attribution on what's exactly causing your sales, but data analytics helps. It's just more so, by being out there and building a brand, it drives results. If you look at, if I ask the audience, name an electric car company, most people would say Tesla. Forget whether you think Tesla is the best car or not. You're going to say it. Why? The brand's out there. If I tell you to name an athletic shoe, most people are going to say Nike or Adidas, right? Or Reebok. If I say, hey, name a credit card, you're going to say American Express or MasterCard or Visa. Well, this is branding. Sure, you could do a Google search, and Google helps with branding as well, but it's a combination of everything that really helps drive results.
Interesting. So I'm jumping around a bit, but you had mentioned the AI. One of my observations, and I'd love to see if you're seeing the same thing or you agree or disagree, is that we're starting to see, you mentioned 4.8 billion daily pieces of content of some type. My observation is that we're starting to see an influx of new content on a daily basis because of AI. And the downstream effect of that is you potentially get lower quality, higher saturation, which decreases the ROI if I'm just doing it through AI. Is that true, or what's your thought there?
So the thought is, you're saying if AI is being used, it just creates more, or you're saying when you put up content, it's getting more saturated because of AI and all the other content that people are producing, or?
Yeah, well, it gives me the ability to create more content because I'm using it through ChatGPT, things of that nature.
Not necessarily. Look, you can take your existing content and have AI help. The problem with AI content in general is the quality is not there. So if you just post tons of AI content, the algorithms are going to realize that your profiles are not getting tons of engagement, and it's going to hurt you when you post really good content. So you can't just go and use AI to post tons of content or have it modify or adjust. Uh, you can't just have it go in and adjust, you know, tons of pieces of content and
Yeah.
just go pop them up. It actually will hurt you from an algorithm standpoint. Like, okay, think of it this way. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm just making this up, okay? And I have another 500 followers. If I keep posting crap AI content, even if it's modifying my existing content, no one's engaging with it, and you see it and you skip over it and you keep skipping over my content, don't engage with it. The next time I post, even if it's good, there's a higher chance that Instagram's algorithm just doesn't show you my content.
Interesting. Okay.
So you can't just post. If it's not super engaging, doesn't matter if it's AI or human created.
Yep.
If it's not engaging, you're screwed. And that's a big mistake most businesses get. They just believe, oh, I got great content. Look at all this cool advice. I have EAT. Well, you can have EAT, but if people have already heard it 100 times, it's just regurgitated content. Who cares for it?
Interesting. So if I'm an event marketing team, what I'm hearing is I have to, and this may be obvious, but I have to work so hard to make sure that my speakers are giving something fresh, something new.
Yes.
Most of the work is up front. Is that
And it needs to be pre-vetted. You can't just let a speaker speak about whatever they want. It has to be something that's for your ICP and is new and fresh.
Mm. I'm curious who since you speak so much, who does that well? An event that you've spoken at that really has dug in with you to make sure that that's the case, or maybe you're just so consistent on creating new and fresh stuff.
I'll be honest, I don't know. And I'm not saying the events don't do it. My team typically deals with it. I show up and I speak and I move on. I do it so often. I'm not that involved with the events. Sadly, I wish I could give you a good answer, but I can't.
Yeah. Interesting. So where I'm trying to bring this back to is the event marketing team. We are not an individual. Often, we're a larger brand. You are an individual, so you can bring your own thoughts and ideas. I am curious from your perspective how you.
Kind of. So my organization shifted from Neil Patel Digital years ago to NP Digital.
Okay.
Almost all the business we get, forget where we get the majority of our traffic from and our leads from. If you actually look at where we get the majority of our revenue, two different things, right? Because all that really matters is revenue at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It comes from people hearing the corporate brand, knowing people that work with us, like client referrals. It comes from employee referrals. It comes from RFPs. And when you have 1,000+ people in an organization like we do, the employees drive a lot more revenue, not leads and traffic, but they drive a lot more revenue than people knowing Neil Patel. And some of the brands we work with, like, I think it was yesterday we closed Chanel, the luxury company that has purses and stuff like that. I got an email notification. We closed Chanel in, I forgot which country it was, but it was a country in APAC because we have offices in over 20 countries. So when you're looking at that, it's just like, oh, cool. No clue about the brand. Most of these people don't know who Neil Patel are. They don't care. They want to know who's the person on their account, what's the value that they're going to get, and what are the results. And the reason I bring this up is when I talk, when we don't really do our own events. We should. They don't look at it as Neil Patel. Believe it or not, 70+% of the revenue comes from NP Digital, the corporate brand. Actually, more than that. My personal brand doesn't even drive 10% of the revenue.
So is there a reason why you don't do your own events? Just a different.
It's too much work.
Okay.
We should one day hire someone who throws events. I don't know if you guys do. And then just...
We don't. But we work with a lot of folks that do.
There you go. And then just throw an event. But I just look at it as like, I already speak so often. I want to stay home and just be with the family. As crazy as it may sound, like, I think events are really good. And I had an epiphany in 2024, middle of the year. I was like, you know what? Forget speaking at events with tons of people. I should just speak at events that have our ideal customer and do one per month per country. Like, think about that, right? Or one per month per region. So one for the Americas per month, one for EMEA, and then one for APAC. So if you do that, you're speaking 3 times a month and you're speaking to your ideal customers, and it's fishing with dynamite. And a year or two later, you start noticing a lot of RFPs and business from them. But then, even though I was like, we should do this, I came to the realization I'd rather make less money and be home with my family.
Mm,
But you have to keep in mind, I'm not going from the extreme. Some months I'm on the road 27 days out of 30.
yeah, interesting. So I'm sure you work with plenty of brands that have an event marketing portfolio
And yeah, like I just got hit up from MailChimp. They're like, hey, we want you to speak. Someone on my team said, hey, MailChimp wants you to speak in Australia. And then I was like, oh, when's the date? Because I'm trying to stick to only 10 events next year. And then I think a few days later, they're like, hey, they also want you to speak in London. And I was like, oh, this is getting harder and harder. Because like, how do you choose? And then they're like, oh, LinkedIn wants you to do an event in APAC. And I'm like, yeah. Like, can you combine some of them so I can consider them one trip? You get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, but you know, it's an effective strategy to do events and speak at events. You just got to find a balance of which ones to do, which ones have your right customers or enough audience if you're just going for the branding. But yeah,
Now, and then on the other side, being able to meet your customers, meet your prospects, meet your ICP in person has got to be a pretty powerful thing for the rest of the organization, which is a proponent for doing events. When you say,
it is. But what I found is I was talking to my co-founder about this morning. I'm like, what's more scalable is we just go and acquire companies in every single country that's already built up the relationships with the brand. So I don't have to go and speak.
interesting.
But in ideal world, yes, you should speak often. I'm just speaking too much, so I'm kind of burnt out,
Yeah.
right? Like I think speaking twice a month would be ideal for me. But when I'm on the road and I'm speaking at 5 or 6 events in 1 week, that's just a lot. And then, it's just like, all right, you go home for 3 days and you're back on the road and you're doing another 4 or 5 events. Like it's just a lot. And then you have to keep up with work at the same time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. I would
Yeah.
have to say that events are one of the main reasons our corporations has grown. But once you start getting to like 1,000+ people, you start growing in many other ways where you don't need to speak at 3 events in a week.
But isn't this the reason why you would want to have other people that are experts also on stage?
Bingo, you got it right. So we have this lady who works for us. Her name is Rubina. Rubina heads up India for us. Okay, India is a really good market for us outside of the U.S. I think it's our #2 market. I know a lot of people look at India as like a third world country, but there's so much money going into India, especially from foreign companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook, etc. So just hear me out here. Rubina has 300,000 LinkedIn followers. I found that out from someone else on the
Wow.
team. I was like, all right, this is great. She's part of an organization that has a massive event. It's one of the biggest marketing events in India. She's a volunteer, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what her position is. It's not paid. It's, volunteering and just helping out. And she messaged me like, Neil, they would love to have you speak. I think it'll help our organization. I was like, Rubina, I got a great idea. She's like, what? I'm like, I'm busy during these days. You should speak. And what
Right.
we're trying to do is empower all of our team to go and speak on a regular basis instead of Neil Patel being the speaker.
Totally.
And I just did that during Brazil. Instead of me speaking during Thanksgiving in Brazil, Marink, and I couldn't, that family issue, someone in the family was getting a surgery, and I told the event ahead of time. First time I canceled on an event, and I don't even know how long. I think it was like 3, 4 years, 5 years. I've spoken like with the flu on stage. Like I'll do whatever not to cancel. But someone was having a major surgery, and I had to be there for the surgery. And when one of our leaders in Brazil spoke, and they're like, "Yo, we collected a ton of leads. Not as many as when you spoke. We got tons of leads, tons of." I'm like, "Great. You're based in Brazil. You should just do this double to triple the amount of times that I would do it in Brazil. So instead of me speaking 4 or 5 times a year in Brazil, you should speak 12, 13 times and it'll make up for me not being there. And it's more scalable."
Yeah, it seems like the challenge that a lot of bigger organizations have when their CEO or whatever is maybe the face and their event marketing teams want to leverage that expert as much as possible, but we've got to figure out how to expand that expertise, that authority, that trust to other individuals. it seems like the only way to truly scale in that regard.
Yeah, and what we do is, I don't know if this would be considered an event marketing department, but we have a person named Marina who heads up all of our event stuff for us globally. All right. I don't know who's on our team, but she heads it up. And if I can speak, great, but she also looks for opportunities for people on our team within those local regions to scale it up. So instead of us throwing our events, we're piggybacking off of other people's events and putting our people on there where we believe it's our ideal customer and speaking in volume, and it helps pick up business.
Interesting. So I guess the last thing for me is, you met Brian and we brought him on to really kind of up our content and up our distribution. And at some point we want to get to where we actually have a physical event. But if you were in our shoes, we're a young organization, 3 years old, really, doing really well, but we're just trying to produce as much content as we can, really with this idea that we want to walk in the shoes of our customer, which is event marketers, which is why we're hosting webinars. We'll ultimately do a lot of, local events, but ultimately get to an event. How would you approach that process?
So you guys specialize in selling to events, correct?
To event marketing teams, yeah.
And I would work with event marketing teams and even the events, because a lot of events work with event marketing teams. Would you agree with this? For booths, sponsorships, speaking, etc.
To some degree, yeah.
Yes, I would work with them to help them, and you can do a webinar for all of the people who are doing the sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, because you can teach them, you can help them educate their customers how to get a better ROI from events. And that'll also create more content for you. You can slice and dice it, and you're also building great relationships with your ideal customers at the same time.
Interesting. So in our case, we're really trying to educate that event marketing world on the power of their speaker network, because the speaker CRM is really the core piece that we're trying to roll out. So perspective, having, correlating this to the Google EEAT framework, connecting the dots between the event team and the digital marketing team is.
What about the speaker bureaus?
Yep.
Right. But I look at content as what you guys are doing is, yes, the webinars, the social content's going live. I would find people within your space and go live. But when you're going live like this, instead, you should do it on the speaker's profile as well, because you can go live on both your profiles and the other person's profiles at the same time. Knocks two birds with one stone. Why wouldn't I want the content on my social profiles? Because at the end of this, I'll ask you guys for the recording. You can send it to my team over email and they'll repurpose it. Why not go live on both places? You're 3 years old. Leverage other people's platform to build your guys' brand. They're happy because they're creating more content. It's a win-win. They're saving time.
Interesting.
Right? Like just from this, I know my team will come up with 2-3 clips easily, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I just want it on my socials and just go live at the same time? I'm building a better relationship with my community.
So it's an interesting challenge that a lot of event teams have. They work so hard leading up to the event, they produce the event, and then they kind of have this hangover period. But what I'm hearing from you is that's when the good stuff kind of happens from there, and really making sure that the speakers have the content in hand to be able to distribute as effectively as possible. Not all of them have a team that can cut up the information.
But they need to do it for the speaker, ideally. If they do it for the speaker, ideally, oh, that's money. But most people suck at doing that. I hate to say it.
So if the event team did it for the speaker just to hand feed them and then leverage the speaker's network after the fact, then you're starting to really see the impact.
Yes. It's helping the organization as well.
Absolutely.
But they got to do a good job chopping it up. Most don't.
Yeah. Interesting. Brian, were there any questions that you had or that the live audience had?
There was. You kind of just struck on it a little bit. It was about, what is like the end ROI goal of feeding the content machine, which was one of the questions. You kind of just nailed it.
Yeah,
So
the goal is you make revenue. If you're not positively making revenue from what you're doing, you got to reevaluate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think to Chris's point where, right, like so much, like you're not doing events, Neil, because it's a ton of work, right? You're burning a ton of calories. But, so like Chris said, we have event teams that you finish the event, the curtain drops, it's wrapped, and then it's like everything
But
comes to a.
but that's a problem. They just stop. Why? You just created all this content. You should have kept going until the next event, because then you would have built up way more anticipation and people would have loved it. And then you're going to sell way more tickets, get more people back, better speakers, all this kind of stuff, and be way more successful. You can't go dark for like another 11 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And one of the challenges that we see is there's this silo from the broader marketing organization between the event marketing organization. So I think where I'm curious on clicking in with you is, do you have any suggestions on how does a head of event content make the case to align the CMO more to what's possible from an ROI standpoint once the event's done and you've captured all this content?
You don't even have to align with the CMO. You just have to give them the content that is great, and why wouldn't they want to use it? It really is that simple. So I'll give you an example. I've spoken at HubSpot's event a few times over the last few years. I think the last 3 years in a row. When I speak at HubSpot, they're great. They've put me on the main stage, I think 3 years in a row. When I speak there before the event, we're mentioning it in our podcast and they're asking us to. They're promoting us, the speaker, within their newsletters to their audience, which is a benefit to us. We're creating content directly for them that they can use for promotions to get people excited about the speech and sell tickets, right? There's a lot of collaboration. Speakers love that. You may say, why would a speaker love it? They got to promote the event. Not really. The event's promoting them and vice versa. It makes them look good and is building up their brand at the same time. HubSpot's conference has grown each year, not because of me, but because of the strategy and them doing this with a lot of speakers.
I think a lot of people, a lot of events, whether it's HubSpot or they do a great job pre-event. It's the post-event where they need help. And
I would agree with that because they stop with the content.
yeah,
Although with HubSpot, I was able to get our content. They put it up on the web. They push it. They promote it. You can do follow-up articles on their blog. So they try to continue the relationship, but most events and organizations don't do that.
and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, is because you do it 365 all around. And it's an incredible job. And if event teams can emulate that more, I think it's only going to help from driving registrations, driving revenue, things of that nature. Yeah, Brian, any other final?
Yeah, if I could sneak in, there are just two more questions that snuck in from the audience, Neil.
Go for it.
If you have a minute. One is Sarah Merrick had referenced an article that you wrote. It was how Eventbrite built and scaled their marketing organization. And she was just asking about any insights on how their SEO efforts contributed to enhancing the brand visibility, and if you have any strategies or tips.
Yeah,
From
so
that perspective.
Eventbrite built up a lot of authority and a lot of companies were using them to sell tickets. And they still could. What made Eventbrite successful is they started creating landing pages for each event. So when people would Google for the event, they would start popping up. The key is authority. And because Eventbrite was a platform that a lot of people are using, their authority built up really, really fast. And it was amazing. I don't think that's as easy to do in today's world unless your product's amazing, but it was super effective for them.
That's great. And there was one more question, Sarah Stafford, thanks for submitting. She asked, what are assets or items that you as a speaker would have utilized had you been provided it by the event to help drive registration, more awareness? Like, what are the easiest, most helpful assets from a speaker's point of view as the speaker?
Clips. It's clips more than anything else. Most speakers don't care to put an image up promoting an event. Because they feel that it provides no value to their audience and only provides value to the event. But on the flip side, if you give a clip, even if it's with them, like doing a webinar or pre-recording before the event, and then they chop it up and slice and dice it, and then you can put it up on your socials, you're educating and providing value. So then the speaker doesn't feel like they're just pushing or shilling something. They look at it as they're putting out content that's very valuable to people. And then recording a teaser clip, which someone just said, I think in the comments, that does not help much. It has to be something that's of value that the speaker will want to share. And usually the best way to get that is create content with the speaker, do a pre-webinar or pre-live with potential attendees and the speaker. And, they can talk about some of the things they're going to discuss, some of the things they're not going to discuss, right? And just share nuggets and be like, if you want more, you can go to the event. But people will slice and dice it and then pop it on their profiles.
And is it the same for post-event, Neil? What would you share post-event? Clip?
Same. I would share a lot of the stuff and just clips of the speaking and the whole speeches all post-event. But I would drip it out over time and not just do it in one day.
Got it. Brian, any last?
Yeah. One more stuck in is your speaker content driving your overall content strategy, or is it more of a holistic integrated part of the strategy?
My social content, blog content drives actually my speaker content. We take
It's the other way around.
stuff that does well on social and then we put it into my slide deck because we know it'll resonate with people based on how well it did on the social one.
Interesting.
That's
So
how
if
we
I'm
get
an
higher
event
speaker
marketing-
ratings.
Yeah. If I'm an event marketing team, I should be leveraging my content marketing team that, to be able to see what type of content is resonating, and that being one of the components of what I'm looking for in my speakers for on stage. Is that?
Yes, we straight up look at what content is engaging and then we figure out what to put in our decks because then we already know what people like and want to engage with. You could say, oh, people have already seen it. Chances are the people in the audience have not seen it.
Super interesting. Well, Neil, I really appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was
Safe
fun.
travels. We will get you the clips and snippets and summaries and send all the stuff to your team.
Sounds good.
All right, bud.
Awesome.
Thanks, Neil.